Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to have John Walker with us today. He's a man I respect greatly, a peer in the leadership development, learning and development space, and I'll let him introduce himself. But thrilled to have you, John. Welcome.
Bobby, I greatly appreciate you having me on here and really value our partnership over the last several years. And hello, everyone. My name is John Walker, and I am a senior learning development consultant at GE Appliances. I've been in the learning development space for a number of years. Previous to that, worked in training development with the military. I've got a background in a lot of areas of psychology, and I just loved being able to be in a position where I can be of service to others to help them see the worth, the value, the dignity that they have, and be able to bring that to the ways in which they show up and how they perform.
Wonderful. Thanks, John. And, before we dive into the questions, I invite you in. I think the other benefit of having you today for our listeners is the range of type of employees, leaders that you
Mhm.
work with, right? So my assumption of what I know of GE Appliance and your Army, military background is that you're dealing with blue collar and white collar all the way up to the C-suite. So please feel free to compare and contrast and bring that in because I think it would be very valuable. So let's kick off with, how do you define respect in the workplace, John?
I think that respect in the workplace is something that it goes beyond just words. It goes beyond lip service, right? It's action. It's actionable things that we do. I think that part of that is seeing the inherent dignity, the value that other people bring. I mean, how do you bring that out? I think some of the ways that you can do that is, as a leader, just being available. Understanding. Aspects of empathy, come into play a lot when I think about dignity or when I think about respect, and I think about how do you give feedback to somebody, and I think it's both praise and obviously correction as well. And I think that there's respect that's necessary on both ends of those spectrums. Um, Also the word psychological safety creeps in for me when I think about respect. In terms of the workplace and how we show up, I think if there's a lack of respect, then you're obviously going to have a lack of psychological safety, and that infiltrates at all levels within an organization or within a team.
Yeah, thanks, John. I just want to really do a shout out for you and the team at GE Appliance around that first thing you said, that often such things, respect, if you think of it as a competency or a value, can become posters, right? And they're a check the box activity, but the way you defined it says that you really live and practice it in everything you do. And that's certainly been my experience in working with you. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into, how do you know when it exists? Like when you can just feel it, right? And the energy
Yeah.
of a corporate or organizational culture. How do you know when it's there?
Well, one of the things that you alluded to, Bobby, right, is the fact that at GE Appliances, it's blue collar meets white collar, and I saw it in the military as well when you had, your officers and your infantry and all those other sorts of folks that kind of are all mushed together for one cause, one purpose. And I think when I see and you feel that respect, it's not about rank, it's not about role. Obviously in the military, you've got a rank on your chest. But I've seen and heard from a lot of successful leaders in that space. They say, regardless of what the rank says on my chest, it has nothing to do with that. And I think that's one of the first indicators is when you're in that type of space, do people feel like they've got to, posture because of who they are, and their title and all that, or can you walk into that room and really it's not really a matter of who the leader is. You just know that there's an air of respect for everybody, right? Based upon their knowledge, their maybe their tenure or whatever the case may be. So I think that's one huge aspect of it. I think that you can also tell in the tone, the types of conversations that people have with one another, the types of relationships, and I use relationships purposefully because I think when you think about a relationship, there's an air of or an aspect of accountability that goes along with a relationship, right? And when you've got good working relationships, you've got good, hopefully, accountability, and in that respect, I think is an undertone of those relationships as well. Something else that comes to mind is trust. Can I trust? Um, One, can I trust myself to be who I genuinely am? Can I be authentic to who I am because I know that the people around me respect me, or do I feel like I need to, hide a little bit of who that person may be, And so I think that those are some of the things that I think about that I see when I'm in an environment that is a high respect environment.
Yeah, thanks, John. And I want to actually reveal to the audience that we know each other through Ability, my partnership
Yeah,
with this
yeah,
company that brings simulations to corporations around the world. So I think the connection in that partnership piece you're talking about is exactly that, right? Like we've had a wonderful long-term relationship, Ability and GE Appliance, and it's thanks to you and your CHRO Rocky, who just has been phenomenal in modeling everything you've just said. And let me check with you. Is it fair to say that all those traits you're defining are indicators of servant leadership?
oh, 100%. Absolutely. One of the things that Rocky is known for saying, we literally have T-shirts. It says "How matters." And when you think about some of those aspects that I just talked about, it's excuse me, how do we show up? And we show up through that era of respect. And it's how we're going to get things done, because you think about climates that have command and control. Um, that's one way of doing things for sure. But I think that you burn a lot of bridges and you get a lot of temporary success versus, like you're alluding to here, Bobby, this aspect of servant leadership. One of the things that I always, in all the trainings that I do, with all the leaders that I work with, I mean, we literally just did this last week, is you think about being in the manufacturing space. That's thousands upon thousands of people that are shooting screws and putting things together, so on and so forth. Um, if those people don't have what they need to do their jobs effectively and efficiently, then none of us are in business. None of us have jobs, right? And so we have to be in service to those individuals. We have to provide resources. We have to provide an environment. We have to treat them with respect. Because if none of those things are there, then the things that we do at higher levels of leadership, who are you going to lead if you don't have anybody following you, right? And I think that is certainly you know representative of servant leadership here at GE Appliances.
Yeah, again, a specific instance of what I've observed with you all is really well grounded in that experience on the floor, on the factory floor, right? And I think it takes that, we talk a lot about psychological safety and are people willing to speak up with when, mistakes occur. As we know, Amy Edmondson's work on that says that, hey, when employees report more mistakes, those teams are more successful than the ones that don't. Her work was in the hospital sphere, the research, but this applies, I think, in your environment, both with
Absolutely.
military and factory workers, is that it takes leaders to create that safe space for people to speak up, and that's very tied to respect. Awesome, John. So let's go to when do you know when it's not present, when respect is, not working?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are aware when something's off in an environment. I can remember specifically working one of my first jobs out of grad school, and being a new hire there, I was all excited. And after a couple of weeks, I would walk into the office and you just feel this tension, right? And I think that exists similarly in environments where there's a lack of that respect. I think there's some key indicators as well. You see creativity go down, right? You see productivity go down. I think that you start to see infighting increase between people. Civil kind of disputes are kind of really on the rise. I think that those are some of the indicators. I think other things that happen there is, again, people do start to wear their rank or their role on their chest. And they feel like it's almost like they're operating out of a space of fear. Well, this person needs to know that I'm their boss. This person needs to know that I'm their supervisor. This person needs to know that I'm in charge. And they fear that lack of respect, which is why they feel like they have to laud that over other people. I think that sometimes you also have people that just feel ignored or dismissed, right? A lot of their character, their value is maybe attacked or assassinated a lot of times in some of those low respect environments. I think that you see the obviously the dignity, the value, the worth that people bring to into those spaces is called into question, and not maybe not explicitly, but you feel like you're shrinking in a lot of those spaces. Like you show up, you do the bare minimum. That's not going to have somebody kind of looking over your shoulder constantly, and then you go home, you get out of there. And so I think that those are some of the things that remind me of when there's little to no respect within the workplace.
Fantastic, John. My goodness. I'll make sure there's so much there. Yeah, I've asked this question many times, but you just laid out so many aspects of it. And just to summarize what I'm hearing, I think you nailed it with all of those areas and metrics you've mentioned are fear-driven.
Mhm.
And I often say that the opposite of fear is love, and
Yeah.
love is the least, or I think we are more afraid of using that four-letter word than the other four-letter word that gets thrown around like a bomb all the time. So thank you for that, and also to sort of put a cap on this, or yeah, that MIT Sloan has shown research that the cost on productivity of toxic work cultures is $50 billion a year just in the US. So imagine what that looks like globally for, or organizations like yours that operate globally. It can be tremendously damaging. And so I think we also share this belief that these things are not soft skills. These are the hard skills that
Yeah.
if we don't truly embrace them as practices and competencies, they're very detrimental to the bottom line
Yeah.
of the business.
Absolutely. I mean, Bobby, when you say that, again, it's those soft skills. There's nothing soft about respect, right? There's nothing soft about trust. There's nothing soft about these different aspects. And when you don't have it, another thing that just came to my mind is when there's a lack of respect, I think the instances of um, lack of safety, physical safety within a workplace goes up. Because if I don't respect you, and if I feel like you're trying to bully me, then I'm less likely to pay attention to what it is that you have to say, right? And so if you say, hey, you need to put on your PE, your PPE, your protection equipment, all that sort of stuff. Well, no, I don't necessarily need to listen to you, right? Um, and things become flippant and protocols, all those sorts of things, they start to slip and they go by the wayside. And, especially in manufacturing, and obviously in many places, but safety is one of the number one concerns. And I think without that proper respect, um, aspects of safety get called into question because of it too.
So glad you brought that in. It's so common to see in highly regulated or manufacturing safety issues that show up on the factory floors that there are cultures that I've seen that just go by the book, and it's like this is in the policy or this is do or don't.
Yeah.
And just imagine when I think we all know it when you can get people to the what's in it for me
Yeah.
and really connect to that human aspect of lives are at stake and that each of us have a part to play in a safe environment. Such a big difference, right? That ownership that I've seen you all model, it shows up when we do ability simulations and people do presentations, is when people take ownership, even for their mistakes, that is just creates more safety and respect for everyone, that when we can show that we can learn from our mistakes because we all make them.
Definitely.
Wonderful. So, John, let's get to your top tips, my friend. What
Yeah.
would you leave us with in terms of your wisdom on how can we create more respectful workplaces? Your top, 1 to 3. It can be more if you like.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'll leave you with three that I think are important that I've found to really kind of build that aspect of respect. One, first and foremost, is just listening. I think the more that we can actively listen, I think listening exists on a continuum all the way from ignoring to, empathic listening. But I think when we can actively, empathically listen to other people, again, it builds towards that dignity. It shows that value that other people have. I think that's one of the first ones. The other is be consistent and be fair. I think the way in which you lead, and maybe if you even aren't in a leadership role, be that predictable, consistent person, that people come to know over a period of time. I think that that's a really great way to build that character. And it leads me into that last one, which is just modeling accountability. I think the more that we can take, and you mentioned this earlier, Bobby, ownership, right? Can I be accountable? If I mess up, can I raise my hand and say, hey, I got to own this. I messed up. I screwed up over here, so on and so forth. I think the more that we're able to do that as leaders and model, that it's not the end of the world and things aren't going to come to a screeching halt, the better, because it garners respect from others, I think as well. So that would be my kind of my three tips is, listen, make sure that you're fair and consistent and take accountability. And I think that can really start to build that respect within the workplace.
Yeah, John, that's fantastic. I love that term, like empathetic listening, from because active listening is spoken to a lot, but I
Yeah.
think very few people really get the gravity of how to actually put it in place. And thank you again for doing that range from military, frontline, factory workers, blue
Yeah.
collar, and all the way up to the C-suite. I think everything you shared applies to all of them. So thank you for sharing your wisdom. It's been great to have you today, John.
It's been an honor being on here with you, Bobby. I really appreciate the opportunity.